Before anything else, pause for a second and really listen, because this moment is not as ordinary as it seems. There's a reason your attention is being pulled here right now, especially if you've recently found yourself thinking about someone you thought was completely out of your life. You may have convinced yourself that chapter was closed, that whatever happened between you and that person had reached its final point. But lately, something feels different, doesn't it? A thought that keeps returning, a memory that feels stronger than usual, a sense that something unfinished is trying to resurface. And your heart needs this right now, because what you're feeling is not random. Sometimes, before someone returns or reaches out, there is a shift that happens quietly, almost like a signal you can't fully explain but can definitely feel. And listen carefully. This isn't about holding on to the past. It's about recognizing when something from the past is preparing to re-enter your present. Someone is reflecting, someone is reconsidering, and that process is closer to action than you think. The reason this matters is because when that moment arrives, it won't wait forever. And if you're not aware, you might miss what's right in front of you. What you need to understand now is what's happening on their side, because from your perspective, it may have looked like nothing changed. They went silent, they stepped away, and for a long time there was no sign that anything was shifting. So naturally, you assumed they moved on, that they stopped thinking about you, that whatever connection you shared no longer mattered to them. But that assumption is exactly where most people get it wrong. Silence does not mean someone has forgotten, and distance does not mean someone has stopped feeling. In many cases, it means the opposite. It means they needed space to process what they didn't understand at the time. It means they had to step away to see things clearly without the emotions clouding their judgment. And your heart needs this right now because something has been changing within them, slowly and quietly, without you being aware of it. There are moments when people don't realize the value of a connection until they are no longer inside it. When everything is gone, when the conversations stop, when the presence disappears, that's when reflection begins. And reflection leads to realization. They start replaying moments, noticing things they ignored before, understanding your perspective in a way they couldn't when they were caught up in their own mindset. And listen carefully, this kind of realization doesn't happen instantly. It builds over time. It grows through silence. It becomes stronger the longer they sit with what happened. And eventually, it reaches a point where it's no longer just a thought. It becomes a feeling they can't ignore. A pull to revisit what they left behind. A need to correct what went wrong. A desire to say something they never said. And your heart needs this right now, because that internal shift is what leads to action. People don't return randomly. They return when something inside them changes enough to move them. And right now, that movement is getting closer. They are seeing things differently than they did before. They are becoming aware of what they lost, what they misunderstood, and what they could have done differently. And this awareness creates a kind of pressure, a need to respond, a need to reach out in some way. But here's what matters most. Just because they are changing doesn't mean everything is automatically resolved. It means a door is opening, but it's up to both sides to decide what happens next. And this is why this moment is important. Because while they are going through their realization, you also need to understand what this means for you. This isn't just about them returning, it's about recognizing why they are returning and what has actually changed. Because if nothing has changed, the outcome will repeat itself. But if something has shifted, then this moment has the potential to be different. And that difference begins with awareness, both theirs and yours. What you have to understand now is why everything fell apart in the first place. Because without that clarity, you will never fully recognize what this moment actually means. When things ended, it probably felt sudden, confusing, or even unfair. You may have been left with unanswered questions, wondering what changed, what went wrong, or why someone who once felt so close could suddenly become distant. But the truth is, most endings are not caused by a single moment. They are built over time through misalignment, misunderstanding, and a lack of awareness from both sides. At that point, neither of you may have been ready to handle the connection in the way it needed to be handled. Emotions may have been there, but clarity was not. Effort may have been there, but consistency was not. And when those things are missing, even strong connections begin to break down. And your heart needs this right now, because what felt like rejection was not always about you being unworthy. It was often about the situation not being stable enough to continue. Sometimes people walk away not because they don't care, but because they don't yet understand how to show that care in a healthy or consistent way. They act from confusion, from fear, from immaturity, and in that state they make decisions that don't reflect what they truly feel. And listen carefully, timing plays a bigger role than most people realize. Even the right connection can fail at the wrong time. Even something meaningful can fall apart if the people involved are not aligned in their understanding, their growth, or their readiness. And that's what likely happened before. There were things that needed to be learned, patterns that needed to be recognized, and perspectives that needed to change. And without that growth, the connection could not have continued in a healthy way. That's why the distance was necessary. It created space for reflection, space for awareness, space for both of you to step outside the situation and see it more clearly. And during that time, things began to shift. Not instantly, not obviously, but gradually. Understanding replaced confusion, awareness replaced assumption, and the same person who once walked away is now starting to see things from a completely different perspective. And your heart needs this right now because this changes the meaning of what happened. It wasn't just an ending, it was a pause that allowed growth to take place. It was a separation that created the possibility for something more stable to exist later. But that possibility only matters if the lesson was learned. Because if nothing has changed, then nothing will be different. But if growth has happened, then what once ended has the potential to return in a way that is stronger, clearer, and more aligned than before. Now this is where everything begins to move from possibility into reality, because what was once only happening in their thoughts is starting to turn into action. And your heart needs this right now, because the shift you couldn't see before is about to become something you can actually experience. This is the stage where silence breaks, where distance starts to close, where the internal realization they've been going through begins to show itself externally. But here's what you need to understand. It won't happen in a dramatic or obvious way at first. It rarely does. Instead, it begins quietly. A message that seems simple on the surface, a small attempt to reconnect, a conversation that feels casual but carries deeper meaning underneath. And if you're not paying attention, you might overlook it or misinterpret it completely. And listen carefully, this moment is not just about them coming back, it's about how they come back. Because there is a difference between someone returning out of habit and someone returning with awareness. This time, there is thought behind it. There is reflection behind it. There is a level of understanding that wasn't there before. They are not reaching out the same way they would have in the past. There is hesitation. There is carefulness. There is a sense that they are aware of what went wrong and don't want to repeat it. And your heart needs this right now because this is what shows that something has actually changed. It's not just about the action, it's about the intention behind the action. You may notice a different tone, a different energy, a different approach in the way they communicate or try to reconnect. It may not be perfect, it may not be exactly what you expected, but it will feel different enough for you to recognize that something has shifted. And this is where awareness becomes everything. Because if you expect it to look exactly the way you imagined, you might miss it. If you expect a perfect apology or a complete explanation right away, you might overlook the small but meaningful steps that are actually happening. And your heart needs this right now because real change often shows itself gradually. It builds through actions, through consistency, through the way someone shows up over time. And this moment you are approaching is just the beginning of that. It is the opening, not the conclusion. It is the first step, not the final result. And how you interpret that step will shape everything that follows. Because if you dismiss it too quickly, you close the door again. If you accept it without awareness, you risk repeating the past. But if you remain present, if you observe carefully, if you allow things to unfold without rushing to conclusions, you give this moment the space it needs to reveal its true direction. And that's what matters most right now. Not just that they are returning, but that you are aware enough to recognize what their return actually means.